What would you risk for revenge? Your freedom? Your life? Everything you've ever known? Picture this. A kingdom built on blood and bone, where the weak are crushed beneath iron paws and the strong devour anyone who dares stand in their way. In this world, an Omega is less than nothing. A tool, plaything, disposable. But what happens when that Omega refuses to break? When she rises from the ashes of her torment and does the unthinkable? When she doesn't just survive but strikes back so fiercely that an entire reign trembles? One Omega, one act of defiance so brutal, so complete, that it shattered everything an Alpha King believed himself to be. Now he wants her brought before him, breathing but broken, so he can finish what she started. This is not a love story. This is war wrapped in fur and fang. Before we continue, kindly subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The first time Zephine killed someone, she was only trying to survive. She remembered the weight of the rock in her hand, slick with rain and moss. She remembered the way it connected with the side of the guard's skull, the sickening crack that echoed through the stone corridor. She remembered his eyes going wide, then empty, as he crumpled at her feet. That was 3 years ago, in the dungeons beneath the Iron Summit, before she learned that survival and living were not the same thing. Now, as she crouched in the hollow of a rotted oak tree, listening to the hunting party crash through the forest behind her, Zephine understood that she had long since stopped trying to live. She was only trying to make them hurt the way they'd hurt her. The forest was thick here, old growth that even the Vartek Pack's lumber crews hadn't touched. The canopy blocked out the moon, turning the world into shapes and shadows. Perfect for hiding, even better for killing. She counted the footsteps. For wolves, maybe 5 spread out in a search pattern. They were good, she'd give them that. Trained hunters who knew how to move through terrain without bunching up, without giving a target. But they were tracking an Omega. They expected fear. Expected her to run blindly, to make mistakes. Zephine smiled in the darkness, feeling the familiar weight of the stolen blade against her ribs. Let them underestimate her. Let them think she was just another broken Omega fleeing her fate. They had no idea what she'd already done. The closest wolf passed within 10 feet of her hiding spot. She could smell him, all arrogance and bloodlust, eager for the hunt. He was young, probably hadn't seen more than 20 summers. His wolf form was sleek and powerful, dark gray with silver markings along his spine. Beautiful, deadly, completely unaware. Zephine waited until he'd moved past, then slipped from the hollow like smoke. Her bare feet made no sound on the forest floor. Years of abuse had taught her to move like a ghost, to make herself so small and quiet that she could disappear even in plain sight. She'd been invisible for so long. Now she wanted them to see her just long enough to understand what they'd created. The young wolf paused, head tilting. He'd caught her scent. Too late. She was already moving, blades singing through the air. Caught him across the throat before he could shift or cry out. Hot blood sprayed across her face, her chest. He went down in a tangle of limbs that became human again as death took him, his eyes wide with shock. Zephine wiped the blade on his tunic, her hands steady. No trembling, no hesitation. She'd left those weaknesses behind in the Alpha King's court, along with her innocence and her hope. A howl split the night. They'd found the body. Good. She ran then, not in panic but with purpose, leading them deeper into the old forest where the trees grew so close together that wolves couldn't maneuver properly, where the ground was treacherous with hidden roots and sudden drops, where she'd spent the last 2 weeks preparing her killing ground. Behind her, the hunt intensified. She could hear them crashing through the undergrowth, could smell their rage mixing with the first threads of fear. They were starting to understand that this wasn't a normal hunt. The Omega they were tracking had fangs of her own. Zephine vaulted over a fallen log, her wolf vision cutting through the darkness with ease. Even in human form, even as damaged as she was, her wolf senses remained sharp. That had been the one mercy in all her suffering. They'd broken her body, shattered her spirit, but they couldn't take away what she was born with. She could hear their thoughts now, carried on the pack bond that still connected all Vartek wolves whether they wanted it or not. Confusion, anger, the creeping realization that something was very wrong. One of them, a female tracker named Brinda, sent out a mental call. Pull back. This is a trap. But the hunt leader, a brute called Gordek, snarled in response. The Alpha King wants her alive. We don't return without her. Alive. Always alive. Because death would be too kind. Death would be an escape from what he had planned. Zephine's jaw clenched as she ran. She knew exactly what awaited her if they dragged her back to the Iron Summit. She'd lived it before, in those endless months after she'd been declared Omega, after her pack standing had been stripped away because she couldn't shift fully, because her wolf was damaged, broken. The Alpha King Dravish had decided she would serve as an example. A reminder to every Omega in the pack of what happened when you were weak. When you failed to meet the standard of strength that Vartek demanded. She'd spent 6 months in his court as a living lesson in humiliation. Beaten when she moved too slowly. Starved when she showed defiance. Violated in ways that still made her wake screaming in the few moments she allowed herself to sleep. And through it all, Dravish had watched with those cold amber eyes, a small smile playing at his lips. He'd enjoyed it. Not just her suffering, but the power it represented. The absolute control. He'd told her once, when she dared to look him in the eye, that she existed only because he allowed it. That her life had value only in what pain it could teach others. She'd believed him then, had let that belief crush her until she was barely more than a ghost haunting her own body. But something had changed. Something had broken loose inside her during one of the worst beatings, when she'd felt her ribs crack and tasted blood in her lungs and knew that this time might actually kill her. Instead of fear, she'd felt rage. Pure, crystalline, beautiful rage. It had filled the empty spaces inside her, had given her something to hold on to when everything else was gone. And in that moment, gasping on the floor of Dravish's throne room while the court laughed, she'd made herself a promise. She would survive, and she would make him pay. The trap was ahead, a narrow ravine she'd scouted weeks ago when she'd first started planning her escape. The sides were steep and slick with moss, and at the bottom, hidden beneath a layer of leaves, were the sharpened stakes she'd spent 3 days preparing. Zephine leaped the ravine easily, her momentum carrying her across. She landed, rolled, and came up running. Behind her, she heard Gordek's triumphant howl. He'd seen her jump, thought he had her cornered. The massive black wolf came hurtling through the trees, powerful legs eating up the distance. He was fast, faster than she'd expected. His wolf form was enormous, easily twice her size, built for war. He leaped and fell. His howl of victory turned to a scream of agony as he plummeted into the ravine. The stakes caught him mid-fall, punching through fur and flesh with wet, tearing sounds. Zephine stopped running and turned back, walking slowly to the edge of the ravine. She looked down at Gordek's broken body, impaled and dying. His wolf form was already flickering, trying desperately to shift back to human, as if that might somehow save him. Their eyes met. "The Alpha King wants me alive," Zephine said softly. "But I never agreed to that." She watched until his eyes went glassy, until the last breath rattled out of his massive chest. Then she turned away. 2 more hunters burst into the clearing. They skidded to a halt when they saw Gordek's body, their wolf forms shimmering with barely controlled panic. Zephine stood on the other side of the ravine, clearly visible in a shaft of moonlight that had broken through the canopy. Blood covered her from neck to waist, some of it hers, most of it not. Her dark hair hung in tangled ropes around her face. Her eyes, once a soft brown, now gleamed with something feral and broken. "Go back," she told them, her voice carrying across the distance. "Tell Dravish I'm done running. Tell him I'm coming for him. Tell him the Omega he tried to destroy is going to burn his kingdom to ash." The female, Brynthei, shifted to human form. She was older than the others, a veteran tracker with scars marking her arms and face. "You're insane. Do you know what he'll do to you? What he'll do to anyone who helped you?" "I didn't ask for help." Zephine tilted her head. "I don't need it. He's the Alpha King. You're nothing. You're broken. You can't even shift properly. I know exactly what I am." Zephine's smile was terrible to see. I'm what he made me, and now he's gonna choke on it. Brynda took a step back, her wolf instincts screaming danger despite everything she knew about Omegas, about weakness, about the natural order. This small, bloody creature should not have made her afraid. But she was. Run, Zephine said again. While you still can. Brynda and the other hunter exchanged a glance. Then they turned and fled into the forest. Zephine watched them go, her chest heaving. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving behind the familiar ache of her injuries. The beating from 2 weeks ago, the one that had finally pushed her to escape, had cracked at least 3 ribs. They ground together with every breath. She pressed a hand to her side, feeling the wet warmth of fresh blood. She'd torn something open during the fight. Not good, but not important. Not yet. She had work to do. Zephine turned and melted back into the forest, heading not toward safety but toward the one place no one would think to look for an escaped Omega. She was going back to the Iron Summit. Not to the main compound where Dravish held court and the pack warriors trained. No, she was going to the old barracks, the abandoned section of the fortress that had been sealed off after a roof collapse killed a dozen wolves 5 years ago. That's where they'd taken her, in those worst moments. When Dravish wanted privacy for his cruelty. When the screaming needed to be away from sensitive ears. That's where she'd found it. The proof that would shatter everything Dravish had built. She'd been half dead from another beating, sprawled on the floor of one of the old barracks cells, when she'd noticed the loose stone. She'd worked it free more out of boredom than curiosity, expecting nothing. Instead, she'd found the hidden compartment, the carefully wrapped documents, the proof that Dravish's claim to the Alpha throne was built on lies and murder. He wasn't the rightful Alpha King. He'd killed his way to the throne, had murdered his own brother and the brother's entire family to seize power. The documents laid it all out. Testimony from witnesses he'd thought dead. Evidence he'd been too arrogant to destroy completely. Zephine had memorized every word before carefully replacing the stone. She'd known, even then, that this was her way out. Her weapon. But she'd also known she couldn't just reveal it. Dravish was too powerful, too entrenched. He controlled the pack warriors, the court, everything. If she'd simply tried to expose him, she would have died screaming, and the truth would have died with her. So she'd bided her time, endured, planned, and when the moment was right, when she'd gathered enough strength and enough rage, she'd struck. Not at Dravish directly. That would come later. First, she'd gone after his power base. His supporters. The wolves who'd helped him seize the throne and who'd grown fat on the spoils of his rule. She'd started small. An accident here, a mysterious death there. Nothing that could be traced back to her. Nothing that would raise alarms. But then she'd gotten bolder. She'd killed Thorgrin, Dravish's most trusted general, in his own bed. She'd left evidence that pointed to a rival pack, turning allies into enemies overnight. She'd poisoned the water supply to the warriors' barracks, not fatally, but enough to leave half the fighting force weak and sick for weeks. She'd set fires, sabotaged supply lines, spread rumors that turned friends into suspects. And through it all, she'd made sure Dravish knew it was her. Little messages left at each scene. Symbols only he would recognize. Reminders of what he'd done to her. He'd gone mad trying to catch her. Had ordered hunts that pulled warriors away from defending the borders. Had executed wolves on suspicion alone, creating resentment and fear among his own people. His reign was crumbling, and everyone could see it. The Omega had bloodied his reign. Had proven that even the lowest could strike at the highest. And now he wanted her brought to him alive so he could make an example that would restore his power, his control. But Zephine had no intention of giving him that satisfaction. She was going to finish what she'd started. She reached the outer wall of the Iron Summit as the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. The fortress loomed above her, massive and imposing, built into the side of the mountain itself. She knew every entrance, every weakness. She'd spent months studying it when she'd been a prisoner inside. The old barracks had a drainage tunnel that led to the river. It was too small for most wolves to navigate comfortably, but Zephine had always been slight. she'd be able to squeeze through. She found the tunnel opening, half hidden by overgrown thorn bushes. The bars that had once covered it had rusted away years ago. Perfect. Zephine took a deep breath, ignoring the pain in her ribs, and crawled into the darkness. The tunnel was tight and foul, clogged with debris and stagnant water. She had to pull herself forward on her elbows, the stone scraping her skin raw. Several times she had to stop and force herself not to panic as the walls seemed to press in from all sides. But eventually, after what felt like hours, she emerged into the old barracks' lower level. The place was exactly as she remembered it. Broken furniture, collapsed walls, the smell of rot and mold. No one had been here in weeks, maybe months. She navigated through the debris by memory, heading for the cell where she'd found the documents. But when she reached it, she froze. The cell door stood open. The stone she'd carefully replaced was pulled loose, sitting on the floor. The hiding place was empty. Zephine's heart hammered against her broken ribs. Someone had found it. Someone had taken the evidence. Looking for something? She spun, blade already in her hand. A figure stepped from the shadows. Male, tall, with the bearing of a warrior. But he wore no colors, no pack insignia. "Who are you?" Zephine demanded. The stranger smiled. "Someone who knows what you've been doing. Someone who knows what you found." He tilted his head. "And someone who can help you finish what you started." "I don't need help." "No." He gestured to her blood-stained tunic, her labored breathing. "You're injured, hunted, and now the proof you needed is gone. How exactly do you plan to bring down the Alpha King?" Zephine's grip tightened on the blade. "How did you know about the documents?" "Because I'm the one who put them there." His smile widened. 15 years ago, when I realized Dravish had murdered my family and stolen what was rightfully mine, the world tilted. "You're lying," Zephine whispered. "Everyone from the rightful Alpha line is dead. Almost everyone." He stepped closer, letting the light from a crack in the ceiling fall across his face. And Zephine saw it. The resemblance to the old Alpha that she'd seen in faded portraits. The same strong jaw. The same sharp cheekbones. "My name is Kelver," he said quietly. "And I've been waiting a very long time for someone brave enough, angry enough to do what I couldn't. To make Dravish bleed." Zephine stared at him, her mind racing. If he was telling the truth, if he really was the rightful Alpha. "Why now?" she asked. "Why reveal yourself now?" "Because you did something I never could." Kelver's expression turned fierce. "You made him afraid. You showed the pack that he's not invincible. And now, together, we can end him. Together." Zephine laughed bitterly. "I've survived on my own. I don't trust anyone. Smart. Trust is a luxury people like us can't afford." He pulled something from his cloak and held it out to her. "The documents. All of them. But I'm not asking for trust," Kelver continued. "I'm offering you a choice. You can keep doing this alone. Keep striking at him from the shadows until eventually he catches you. And he will catch you, Omega. You're already dying from those injuries." Zephine's jaw clenched. She couldn't deny it. The pain in her side was getting worse. "Or," Kelver said, "you can let me help you. I have resources, safe houses, healers who won't betray you, and I have something else. Something you need." "What?" "Information about Dravish's plans." Kelver's eyes glittered. "He's not just hunting you to punish you. He's hunting you because he's figured out that you know the truth about his claim to the throne. And he's planning something that will make it impossible for that truth to ever matter." "What are you talking about?" "In 3 days, Dravish is meeting with the alphas of the 5 neighboring packs. He's going to propose a treaty that will unite all 6 packs under his rule. Once that happens, even if the truth comes out about how he seized power, it won't matter. He'll have too much support, too much strength." Zephine felt her blood run cold. He can't. The other alphas would never agree to submit to him. They will if he offers them something they want more than independence. And he has. He's offering them access to the silver mines in Vartek territory. Enough wealth to make them all rich beyond imagining. The silver mines. The source of Vartek's power and prosperity. Dravish was going to buy the loyalty of the other packs. "We have 3 days," Kelver said softly. 3 days to stop him. 3 days to expose what he is and take back what he stole. Zephine looked down at the documents in his hand, then back up at his face. Every instinct screamed at her not to trust him. She'd been betrayed too many times, hurt too deeply, but she was also practical. He was right. Alone, she would eventually fall. Her injuries would slow her down, and Dravish's hunters would close in. And the thought of him succeeding, of him expanding his reign to other packs, of him spreading his cruelty even further, she couldn't let that happen. "If you betray me," she said quietly, "I will kill you. I don't care who you are or what you think you're owed. I will gut you and leave you for the crows." Kelver's smile was sharp and approving. "I would expect nothing less." He held out his hand. Zephine stared at it for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. His grip was firm and warm. Human. Real. "So," she said, "where do we start?" Kelver's expression turned calculating. "We start by making Dravish's worst nightmare come true. We're going to that treaty meeting, and we're going to burn his kingdom down in front of everyone." But the question that haunted Zephine as they left the old barracks together wasn't whether they could succeed. It was whether, after everything she'd done, after all the blood on her hands, she was still fighting for justice, or if she'd become something else entirely. Something just as monstrous as the king she wanted to destroy. The safe house was nothing like Zephine expected. She'd imagined some dingy cave or abandoned hovel where they'd have to sleep on dirt floors and eat scraps. Instead, Kelver led her to a cottage nestled in a valley 3 hours' run from the iron summit. It was small but well kept, with smoke rising from the chimney and herb gardens growing in neat rows beside the door. "You've been living here?" Zephine asked as they approached. Her side was screaming now, each breath a knife between her ribs. She'd managed to keep pace with Kelver, but barely. "On and off for years." He pushed open the door. "After you." Zephine hesitated on the threshold. Entering someone else's space meant vulnerability, meant letting down her guard. But the smell of wood smoke and something cooking, something that smelled like actual food, made her stomach clench with hunger. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten anything more substantial than berries and whatever small game she could catch. She stepped inside. The interior was sparse but comfortable. A fireplace dominated one wall, with a pot bubbling over the flames. 2 chairs sat near the fire, and a table held the remnants of a meal. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books, dried herbs, and various tools. "Sit," Kelver said, gesturing to one of the chairs. "You're bleeding through your shirt." Zephine glanced down. He was right. Fresh blood had soaked through the stolen tunic, spreading in a dark stain across her ribs. She sat, mostly because her legs were shaking too badly to keep standing. Kelver moved around the cottage with practiced efficiency, gathering supplies. He returned with clean cloth, a bowl of water, and several small jars. "I need to see the wound," he said. Zephine's hand went to the hem of her tunic, instinctively protective. "I can do it myself." "Can you?" Kelver's eyebrow rose. "Because from where I'm standing, you look about ready to pass out." He wasn't wrong. The edges of her vision were starting to blur. "I don't." She stopped, hating how weak her voice sounded. "I don't let people touch me." Understanding flickered across Kelver's face. "I know what he did to you, what they all did." His voice was gentle. "But I'm not them. And if we don't treat this wound, infection will kill you before Dravish gets the chance." Zephine stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception, of hidden cruelty. But all she saw was patience. Slowly, she lifted the tunic. The wound was worse than she'd thought. A deep gash ran along her left side, the edges ragged and inflamed. It had torn open during her escape, turning what might have been manageable into something serious. Kelver's expression tightened, but he said nothing. He simply dipped the cloth in water and began cleaning the wound with careful, professional movements. Zephine gritted her teeth against the pain, her nails digging into the chair arms. She forced herself to breathe slowly, to focus on anything but the feeling of hands on her skin. "How did you survive?" she asked, needing the distraction. "If Dravish killed your family, how are you still alive?" Kelver was quiet for a moment, focused on his work. "I was 14 when it happened, young enough that Dravish didn't see me as a threat. He let me live, thinking I'd be too broken, too traumatized to ever challenge him. But you weren't." "No." His jaw clenched. "I was broken. For years I was exactly what he expected. A ghost haunting the edges of the pack, barely existing. What changed? I found the documents. My mother had hidden them, left clues only I would understand." He reached for one of the jars, a salve that smelled of mint and something sharper. "When I realized what I had, I knew I had to leave. If Dravish discovered what I'd found, he'd kill me. So I faked my death and vanished. That must have taken planning." It did. He began applying the salve, his touch surprisingly gentle. "I spent 2 years preparing, learning the wilderness, making contacts outside the pack. And when the time was right, I staged an accident during a hunt. They found my torn clothes and enough blood to convince them I'd been killed by a bear." Zephine hissed as the salve hit a particularly deep part of the wound. "And you've been out here ever since? Hiding? Waiting? Preparing?" Kelver began wrapping clean cloth around her ribs. "I couldn't challenge Dravish directly. He's too strong, has too many loyal warriors. I needed something that would turn the pack against him. The documents. Exactly. But they're not enough on their own. I needed the right moment, the right circumstances." He tied off the bandage. "I needed someone who'd already shaken his power. Someone who'd proven he could be hurt. Me. You." Kelver sat back, studying her. "What you did, it was brilliant. Brutal, yes, but brilliant. You didn't try to fight him head-on. You attacked everything that supported him. His reputation, his control, his warrior's confidence in him." Zephine looked away. "I just wanted him to suffer, the way I suffered. And he has. The entire pack knows he's been terrorized by a single Omega. Do you understand how that's destroyed his image? How it's made others question him?" "Good." The word came out hard and sharp. Kelver reached for the pot over the fire, ladling out a thick stew into a wooden bowl. He handed it to her. "Eat. You need your strength." The smell alone made Zephine dizzy with hunger. She lifted the spoon with hands that trembled and took a cautious bite. Real meat, vegetables, herbs that made it taste like something other than survival. She couldn't help the small sound that escaped her throat. "When did you last have a proper meal?" Kelver asked. "Before." Zephine stopped, not wanting to finish that sentence. "Before her designation as Omega. Before everything fell apart." She ate in silence, focusing on the food, on the warmth spreading through her body. Kelver busied himself with his own meal, giving her space. When she'd finished, scraping the bowl clean, she finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the old barracks. "Why should I believe you? You could be lying about everything. You could be working for Dravish, trying to trap me." "I could be," Kelver agreed. "But I'm not. That's not an answer." "No, it's not." He set his bowl aside. "The truth is, you have no reason to trust me. We just met. For all you know, I'm exactly what you fear. Then why should I help you? Because whether you trust me or not, the information I gave you about the treaty meeting is real. Dravish is making his move in 3 days. And if you want to stop him, if you want to make him truly pay for what he did, you can't do it alone." Zephine's jaw tightened. "I've managed so far. You've survived. There's a difference." Kelver leaned forward. "Let me ask you something. What was your plan? Keep killing his supporters until what? Until he has none left? Until the pack falls apart? And then what? Do you think they'll thank you? An Omega who brought down their alpha through murder and sabotage. I don't care what they think. Maybe not now. But what about when it's over? What happens to you then?" Zephine hadn't let herself think that far ahead. Her entire existence had narrowed to a single purpose: make Dravish hurt. Beyond that, there was nothing. "I'll probably be dead," she said flatly. And if you're not, then I'll leave. Find somewhere new. It doesn't matter. Kelver shook his head. You deserve better than that. You deserve justice, not just revenge. They're the same thing. No, they're not. Revenge is personal. Justice is what you give to everyone he's hurt, not just yourself. Zephine felt something twist in her chest. You don't know what he did to me, what they all did. You're right, I don't know the specifics. But I know what Dravish is. I know he's built his reign on cruelty and fear. I know he's destroyed countless lives, turned the pack into something twisted and vicious. Kelver's voice grew fierce. And I know that if we expose him properly, if we show everyone the truth about how he seized power, we can do more than just hurt him. We can unmake everything he's built. How? The treaty meeting. All 5 neighboring alphas will be there, along with their top warriors and advisors. It's not just a negotiation. It's a display of power. Dravish wants to show everyone how strong he is, how untouchable. So we ruin it. Better than that. We turn it into his trial. Kelver's eyes glittered. Imagine it. All the most powerful wolves in the region gathered together. And we present them with undeniable proof that Dravish is a murderer and a usurper. That he stole the alpha throne through treachery. Zephine felt her pulse quicken. They'd tear him apart. If we do it right, yes. The other alphas have no love for Dravish. They only tolerate him because he's strong. But if they see weakness, if they smell blood. Kelver smiled. Wolves don't hesitate when they see wounded prey. It was tempting. So tempting. The image of Dravish surrounded by his peers, all of them turning on him, all of them seeing him for what he truly was. But there was a problem. How do we even get into the meeting? Zephine asked. Security will be impossible. Dravish will have warriors everywhere. True. But I know the meeting location. It's at the Moonstone Gathering neutral ground. And I have an invitation. Zephine blinked. You what? I'm not just some random wolf hiding in the woods. Over the years, I've built connections. The alpha of the Nightfen pack owes me a considerable debt. I saved his daughter from a rogue attack 5 years ago. He's offered me a place in his delegation. And me. You'll be my companion. Omegas are allowed to attend as servants or companions to higher-ranking wolves. No one will question it. The idea of walking into a gathering of alphas, of putting herself in the middle of so much power and danger, made Zephine's skin crawl. They'll recognize me. Dravish has hunters everywhere. Not as you are now. Kelver stood and moved to a trunk in the corner. He pulled out clothing, fine fabrics in deep colors. You'll be cleaned up, properly dressed. Your hair styled. You won't look like a fugitive Omega. You'll look like someone under the protection of a respected wolf. He brought the clothes over. A deep blue tunic and trousers. Well-made but not ostentatious. Practical. The Nightfen Alpha's delegation arrives tomorrow night, Kelver continued. We'll join them on the road to the Moonstone Gathering. That gives us 1 day to prepare you. Prepare me how? To play a part. To be someone other than the wolf Dravish's hunters are looking for. He met her eyes. Can you do that? Can you walk into a room full of alphas and pretend to be harmless? Zephine looked down at the fine clothes, then at her own blood-stained hands. Could she pretend to be something she wasn't? Could she hide the rage that burned in her chest every moment of every day? She'd spent months being invisible, being nothing. Maybe she could do it one more time. Yes, she said. I can do that. Kelver's smile was approving. Good. Then rest tonight. Tomorrow we prepare for war. Zephine settled into the chair, the warmth of the fire and the food in her belly making her drowsy despite her weariness. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to close her eyes without fear of immediate attack. But sleep brought dreams. Dark dreams of Dravish's throne room, of his cold eyes watching her suffer, of the moment she'd finally snapped, finally fought back. She woke with a gasp, her hand already reaching for the blade that was no longer at her side. Kelver was standing by the window, silhouetted against the early morning light. He turned at her movement. Easy. You're safe here. Safe. The word felt foreign. How long was I asleep? She asked. Most of the night. It's nearly dawn. He moved to the fire, stirring the embers back to life. How's the wound? Zephine pressed a hand to her side experimentally. It hurt, but the sharp agony had dulled to a manageable ache. Better. The salve works quickly. You'll need to rest more, but we don't have that luxury. No, we don't. Zephine stood, testing her balance. Steady enough. What's first? Breakfast. Then we begin your transformation. The transformation, as Kelver called it, was more involved than Zephine expected. First came a proper bath. He'd heated water over the fire and filled a wooden tub in the cottage's small back room. Zephine had stared at it like it was some kind of trap. I'll be outside, Kelver said. Take your time. She waited until she heard the door close before stripping off her filthy clothes. The water was almost too hot, but she sank into it anyway, hissing as it touched her wounds. Slowly, the heat worked into her muscles, easing tension she'd been carrying for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to be without it. She scrubbed away layers of blood and dirt and forest grime, watching the water turn murky. When she finally emerged, she found clean undergarments and a simple robe laid out for her. She dressed and called for Kelver. He returned with scissors and a comb. Your hair. Zephine's hand went instinctively to the tangled mass. She hadn't cut it in years. It hung past her waist now, a matted curtain she usually kept tied back. We need to make you unrecognizable, Kelver explained. And this, he gestured to her hair. This marks you as clearly as a scar. He was right. Every wanted description would mention her long dark hair. Do it, she said. Kelver worked carefully, cutting away the length until her hair just brushed her shoulders. He shaped it, tidied the edges. When he was done, he held up a polished piece of metal that served as a mirror. Zephine stared at her reflection. The woman looking back at her was a stranger. Without the curtain of hair hiding her face, her features seemed sharper, her eyes larger. She looked older, harder. Now the clothes, Kelver said. The blue tunic fit well, tailored to allow movement while still looking formal. The trousers were sturdy, good quality. He added a belt with a simple buckle and soft leather boots that actually fit properly. One more thing. Kelver produced a small wooden box. Inside was jewelry. Nothing extravagant, but well-crafted. A silver cuff for her wrist. Small earrings. Omegas don't wear jewelry, Zephine said. Exactly. You're not presenting as an Omega tonight. You're presenting as my companion. Someone under my protection. He helped her fasten the cuff. These marks you as belonging to my household, such as it is. The weight of the silver felt strange on her wrist. Foreign, but also somehow right. There's something else we need to discuss, Kelver said, his expression growing serious. Your wolf. Zephine stiffened. What about it? You said you can't shift properly. That you're broken. I am. The words tasted bitter. I can shift partially but never fully. It's why they designated me Omega. Why Dravish? She stopped, unwilling to continue. Have you tried to shift since you escaped? No. What's the point? The point is that sometimes trauma affects our wolves. Sometimes what we think is a physical limitation is actually mental. Kelver's voice was gentle. I've seen it before. Wolves who experience severe trauma finding their ability to shift damaged or blocked. So you think I'm just weak-minded? Anger flared in Zephine's chest. No, I think you're wounded. And wounds can heal. He held up a hand before she could argue. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because at the treaty meeting, being able to shift could save your life. Zephine wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong. But a small part of her wondered. She'd always assumed her inability to shift fully was some inherent flaw, something wrong with her from birth. But she'd only started having problems after Dravish's court, after the worst of what they'd done to her. How would I even know if you're right? She asked. Try, right now. See what happens. And if I fail, then we know what we're working with. But if you succeed, Kelver's eyes gleamed. Then we have another advantage. Zephine took a deep breath. She hadn't tried to shift in months. The last time had been agonizing, her body caught between forms, unable to complete the transformation. The pain had been excruciating. But maybe Kelver was right. Maybe things were different now. She closed her eyes and reached for her wolf. It was there as it had always been. A presence in the back of her mind, restless and angry. For so long, she'd kept it suppressed, afraid of the pain that came with trying to shift. Now she let the barriers down. Power rushed through her. Her bones began to shift, muscle and sinew reshaping. But then, as always, it stopped. She was caught, partially transformed. Her hands twisted into claws, but her body still mostly human. Pain lanced through her. She gasped, trying to push through, trying to complete the shift. Breathe! Kelver's voice cut through the agony. Stop fighting it. Let it happen. I can't, Zephine gritted out. It won't. You're trying to force it. That's not how this works. He moved closer. What are you thinking about right now? What's in your head? Images flashed through Zephine's mind. The throne room, hands holding her down. Dravish's voice telling her she was worthless, broken, nothing. Them, she whispered. I'm thinking about them. Then think about something else. Think about what you felt when you first escaped. When you killed Gordek. When you stood over his body and knew you'd won. Zephine latched onto the memory. The feeling of freedom, of power, of finally taking control. Her wolf surged forward. The transformation completed in a rush that left her dizzy. Suddenly she was on 4 legs, her senses exploding with information. She could smell everything. The wood smoke. The herbs. Kelver's scent tinged with excitement and approval. She was whole. For the first time in years, she was completely, fully in her wolf form. A sound escaped her throat. Something between a whine and a howl. Her wolf was smaller than most, built for speed rather than power, with dark fur that would blend into shadows. Not impressive by warrior standards, but it was hers, complete and real and functioning. She shifted back to human, the transformation smooth and natural. She stood there, naked and shaking, tears streaming down her face. You did it, Kelver said softly. I did it. Zephine's voice broke. I'm not broken. No, you never were. She sank to the floor, overwhelmed. All this time she'd believed the lie, that she was defective, damaged beyond repair. And it had been a lie. One more weapon they'd used against her. Kelver gave her space to process, to feel. When she'd finally composed herself and dressed again, he brought her food and sat across from her. This changes things, he said. Being able to shift fully means you can fight properly if needed. It means you have options. Zephine nodded, still processing what had just happened. Thank you for making me try. You made yourself try. I just suggested it. He paused. Can I ask you something? Yes. Why did you go after Dravish's reign the way you did? Why not just run? You could have escaped. Gone far away where he'd never find you. Zephine was quiet for a long moment. Because I'm not the first Omega he's destroyed. I'm not the only one he's hurt. And if I just ran, nothing would change. He'd keep doing it. Keep breaking people. So this is about justice. This is about making sure no one else has to endure what I did. She met his eyes. You were right earlier. It's not just revenge. Or maybe it started as revenge, but it became something more. Kelver nodded slowly. Then we're fighting for the same thing. Are we? Zephine studied him. You want the throne. You want what's rightfully yours. I want Dravish dethroned, yes. Whether I take the alpha position afterward. He shrugged. That depends on what the pack wants. What they need. I'm not him. I won't force my rule on anyone. But you'd take it if offered. I'd consider it. After 15 years in exile, I've learned things. Seen things. I think I could lead better than he does. But that's not the priority right now. Before Zephine could respond, a sound from outside made them both freeze. Footsteps. Multiple sets, moving with purpose. Kelver was at the window instantly, peering through a crack in the shutters. His expression darkened. Hunters. 6 of them spread out in a search pattern. How did they find us? Zephine was already reaching for her blade. They didn't. This is a routine sweep. But if they search the cottage... He turned to her. Can you shift again? Quickly. I think so. Then do it. A wolf traveling with me won't raise suspicion. An Omega alone will. Zephine didn't hesitate. She called her wolf and felt the transformation flow through her smoothly. Within seconds, she was on 4 legs again. Kelver moved to the door. Follow my lead. Don't react, no matter what they say. He opened the door just as the hunters reached the cottage. They were all in human form, weapons visible. The lead hunter, a scarred female with cold eyes, stepped forward. State your business, she demanded. I'm a traveler, resting here for the night, Kelver said calmly. This is an old friend's cottage. He lets me use it when I'm passing through. The hunter's eyes flicked to Zephine in her wolf form. And the wolf, my companion. I'm a tracker. She helps me hunt. The hunter studied them both, suspicion clear in her expression. We're looking for a fugitive, an Omega who's killed several pack members. I heard about that, Kelver said. Terrible business. But I've been on the road for weeks. Haven't seen anyone matching the description. The Omega is dangerous, cunning. She might not look like a threat. I'll keep that in mind. The hunter didn't look satisfied, but she had no real reason to detain them. Stay alert. If you see anything suspicious, report it to the nearest pack settlement. Of course. The hunters moved on, continuing their sweep. Kelver waited until they were well out of sight before closing the door. Zephine shifted back. That was too close. It's only going to get worse. Dravish is pulling out all stops to find you. Kelver's jaw tightened. We need to move up our timeline. How? The Nightfen delegation doesn't arrive until tonight. Then we meet them on the road instead of waiting here. The longer we stay in one place, the more likely we are to be discovered. Zephine nodded. It made sense even if it meant less preparation time. They spent the next hour gathering supplies and erasing signs of their presence. Kelver packed the documents carefully, wrapping them in oilcloth to protect them. He also gathered food, water, and various other items they might need. When everything was ready, they set out. The journey to intercept the Nightfen delegation took most of the day. They traveled through dense forest, avoiding main paths where they might encounter more hunters. Kelver knew the terrain well, leading them through shortcuts that shaved hours off their travel time. As the sun began to set, they reached a clearing where a road cut through the forest. Kelver signaled for them to stop. The delegation should pass through here within the hour, he said. We wait. They settled into the shadows at the edge of the clearing. Zephine's new clothes felt strange, too fine, too clean. She kept catching herself touching the silver cuff on her wrist, unused to wearing anything decorative. Nervous? Kelver asked. Should I be? Probably. We're about to walk into the den of the most powerful wolves in the region and accuse the strongest of them of murder. He smiled slightly. Most people would be terrified. I spent months being terrified. I'm done with that. Good. Because we'll need that fearlessness tomorrow. Zephine turned to look at him. What happens if this doesn't work? If the other alphas don't believe us or decide to side with Dravish anyway? Then we run. Fast and far. And if we can't run? Kelver's expression grew serious. Then we fight. And we die fighting. You're very calm about that possibility. I've been living with it for 15 years. Death doesn't scare me anymore. He paused. What about you? Are you afraid to die? Zephine considered the question. Was she afraid? She'd been ready to die so many times during her escape, during her attacks on Dravish's supporters. Death had seemed almost welcoming. But now, with her wolf restored, with purpose driving her forward, I'm afraid of dying before I finish this, she said finally. Before I see him fall. Then we'll make sure you live long enough to watch. The sound of approaching horses and wagon wheels reached them. Kelver stood, brushing off his clothes. That's them. Remember, you're under my protection. You speak only if spoken to directly. Keep your eyes down, your manner submissive. Zephine bristled at the idea of acting submissive, but she understood the necessity. She was playing a role. She could endure it for one night. The delegation came into view. 4 wagons accompanied by 24 wolves, some in human form on horseback, others running alongside in wolf form. The lead wagon bore the Nightfen Pack's banner, a silver moon on a black field. Kelver stepped onto the road, raising his hand in greeting. The delegation slowed. A man on horseback rode forward, his bearing marking him as someone important. He was older, with gray threading through his dark hair and scars marking his weathered face. When he saw Kelver, his expression shifted to recognition and something like relief. "Kelver, by the moon, it's good to see you alive." The man dismounted, clasping Kelver's forearm in greeting. "We heard rumors that Dravish's hunters were searching for someone matching your description." "Rumors only, Aldrich. I've been careful." Aldrich's eyes shifted to Zephine, who stood slightly behind Kelver with her gaze lowered. "And who is this?" "A companion. Someone under my protection." Something in Kelver's tone made Aldrich pause. He studied Zephine more carefully, and she felt his assessment like a physical weight. Finally, he nodded. "I see. Well, any friend of yours is welcome in our delegation." He turned back to Kelver. "I assume you're heading to the Moonstone Gathering?" "I am. With your permission, I'd like to travel with you." "Permission granted gladly. We can use another experienced fighter." Aldrich gestured to the wagons. "There's room in the 3rd wagon. We'll be traveling through the night to reach the gathering by dawn." They joined the delegation, settling into one of the covered wagons. 2 other wolves were already inside, both warriors by the look of them. They eyed Zephine with casual indifference, which suited her fine. As the wagon lurched into motion, Kelver leaned close and whispered, "So far, so good." Zephine didn't answer. She was too focused on controlling her breathing, on managing the anxiety of being surrounded by so many wolves. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to hide, to get away from potential threats. But she forced herself to stay still, to play her part. Tomorrow she would face Dravish. Tomorrow she would finally have her reckoning. She just had to survive until then. Chapter 3. The Moonstone Gathering. The Moonstone Gathering lived up to its name. They arrived just as dawn broke, and the first thing Zephine saw was the massive stone circle that dominated the clearing. Each standing stone was easily twice the height of a man, and they were arranged in a perfect circle around a central altar. The stones themselves seemed to glow with an inner light, catching and reflecting the rising sun in shades of silver and white. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Kelver murmured beside her. Zephine couldn't deny it. Despite everything, despite her anger and her mission, the sight stirred something in her. This was sacred ground, neutral territory where no pack could claim dominance, where, in theory, justice could be impartial. The Nightfen delegation wasn't the first to arrive. 2 other groups were already there, their wagons and horses arranged in designated areas outside the stone circle. Banners flew, identifying them as the Iron Ridge and Stonemaw packs. And there, on the far side of the clearing, was the largest delegation of all. Varthek. Zephine's breath caught. She could see Dravish's banner, the blood-red wolf on a field of black. Could see the warriors moving with practiced efficiency as they set up camp. Could see him. Dravish stood near his tent, speaking with one of his advisors. Even at this distance, his presence was overwhelming. He was tall and powerfully built, his human form radiating the same dominance as his wolf. His dark hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp planes of his face and those cold amber eyes. Zephine's hand went instinctively to the blade hidden beneath her tunic. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to rush across the clearing, to bury the blade in his throat before anyone could stop her. Kelver's hand closed gently on her wrist. "Not yet," he whispered. "We do this right or we don't do it at all." She forced herself to look away, to focus on breathing. He was right. A direct attack would accomplish nothing except getting her killed. She needed to be patient, but patience had never been harder. The Nightfen wolves began setting up their own camp. Zephine helped where she could, keeping her head down and her movements efficient. Several times she felt eyes on her and looked up to find Vartek warriors watching the new arrivals with casual interest. None of them seemed to recognize her. Kelver's transformation had worked. As the morning wore on, the remaining delegations arrived. Shadowfen came next, their wolves lean and dark. Then finally, Bloodstone, the smallest but most feared of the neighboring packs. By midday, all 6 packs were represented, and the atmosphere in the clearing was charged with tension. Wolves from rival packs eyed each other warily. Small disputes broke out over territorial boundaries within the camp, though none escalated to violence. Not yet, anyway. The meeting begins at sunset, Aldrich informed Kelver. All alphas and their chosen advisors will enter the stone circle. The rest of us wait outside. Understood. I'm bringing you as one of my advisors, Aldrich continued. Your knowledge of pack politics and your unique position will be valuable. Kelver glanced at Zephine. And my companion? She can wait with the other servants and lower-ranking wolves. There's a designated area. Zephine kept her expression neutral, but inside she was calculating. Being separated from Kelver meant being more vulnerable. But it also meant she'd have more freedom to move around, to observe. She'll be fine, Kelver said, though his eyes told a different story. He was worried. As sunset approached, the activity in the camp intensified. The alphas prepared themselves, donning formal attire and gathering their advisors. Zephine watched from the servants' area as Kelver joined Aldrich and 2 other high-ranking Nightfen wolves. He caught her eye once, gave her a small nod. Trust me, his expression said. Then they were moving toward the stone circle, along with representatives from all 6 packs. Zephine watched Dravish approach the circle. He moved with absolute confidence, flanked by 4 of his most trusted warriors. He dressed for the occasion, wearing black leather decorated with silver clasps. He looked every inch the powerful Alpha King he claimed to be. The sight of him made Zephine's stomach turn. As the alphas and their advisors entered the stone circle, guards took up positions around the perimeter. No one else was allowed to approach. Zephine settled in to wait, surrounded by servants and lower-ranking wolves from various packs. Most ignored her, busy with their own tasks or conversations. But one didn't. A young male, barely into adulthood, kept glancing at her. Finally, he worked up the courage to approach. "You're with the Nightfen delegation?" he asked. Zephine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "I haven't seen you before. Are you new to Aldrich's pack?" "I'm a companion to one of his advisors," Zephine said quietly. "Kelver." "Ah." The young wolf nodded. "I'm Yerrick, from Shadowfen. This is my first gathering." "Mine too." Yerrick seemed relieved to find someone else who was new to all this. He settled down beside her, chattering away about the various packs and their reputations. Zephine half listened, more focused on the stone circle. She couldn't hear what was being said inside, but she could see body language. The meeting had begun formally enough, with the alphas seated around the central altar. But as time passed, tensions rose. She could see it in the way some alphas leaned forward aggressively, in the sharp gestures and heated expressions. "I wonder what they're arguing about," Yerrick mused. "The treaty," Zephine said without thinking. "What treaty?" She cursed internally. She wasn't supposed to know about that. "I overheard my master mentioning something about an alliance." Jarek's eyes widened. "An alliance between all 6 packs? That would be unprecedented." "Yes, it would." They fell silent, watching. Inside the circle, Dravish had stood. He was speaking now, his gestures expansive. Several of the other alphas looked interested, others skeptical. This was it. He was making his proposal. Zephine's hands clenched into fists. She wanted to scream at them, to warn them about what they were allying themselves with. But all she could do was watch and wait. Hours passed. The sun set fully, and torches were lit around the stone circle, casting dancing shadows across the ancient stones. The meeting showed no signs of ending. Yerrick eventually wandered off to find food, leaving Zephine alone with her thoughts. That's when she felt it. Eyes on her. Not the casual glances she'd been receiving all day. This was different, focused, intense. She turned slowly and found herself looking directly at one of Dravish's guards. The wolf was staring at her with an expression of growing recognition. Zephine's blood ran cold. The guard's eyes narrowed. He took a step toward her. She stood, trying to look casual, and began walking away. Not running. Running would confirm his suspicions. But she could hear him following, could feel his attention like a weight on her back. She turned a corner around one of the supply wagons, her mind racing. If he raised an alarm, if he called out that he'd found her, everything would be over. Dravish would have her dragged before the gathered alphas, would use her capture to demonstrate his power. The guard rounded the corner after her. Zephine was waiting. She'd pulled the blade from its hiding place, and she struck before he could react. The blade found the soft spot beneath his jaw, driving up into his brain. He died without making a sound. She lowered his body carefully, her heart hammering. She just killed one of Dravish's guards in the middle of the Moonstone gathering, surrounded by dozens of wolves from 6 different packs. If anyone found the body before the meeting ended, she dragged him behind the wagon, covering him with a tarp. It wouldn't hold up to close inspection, but in the darkness, it might buy her time. She was just stepping away when a voice froze her in place. Well, what do we have here? Zephine spun to find another wolf watching her. This one was female, older, with the bearing of a veteran warrior. Her eyes flicked from Zephine to the suspicious lump beneath the tarp. That was impressive, the female said quietly. Quick, clean, efficient. Not what I'd expect from a servant. Zephine's hand tightened on the blade. Could she take this one too? Before she raised an alarm? But the female held up her hands. Easy. I'm not going to call for help. Why not? Because I know who you are. And I think what you're doing is long overdue. Zephine stared at her, trying to process this. You know, I've been watching Dravish for years, waiting for someone to challenge him. When news spread about an Omega wreaking havoc on his reign, I was intrigued. The female smiled grimly. My name is Marska. I serve the Bloodstone Alpha, but I have my own reasons for wanting to see Dravish brought down. What reasons? He killed my brother 10 years ago during a territorial dispute. It was supposed to be a fair challenge, but Dravish cheated. Poisoned my brother before the fight. Marska's expression hardened. I've never been able to prove it, but I know. Zephine studied her, looking for any sign of deception. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to help. Whatever you're planning, whatever move you're going to make, I want in. Could be a trap. An elaborate way to get Zephine to reveal her intentions. But something in Marska's eyes, the barely controlled rage that Zephine recognized because she felt it herself, made her hesitate. There's going to be a confrontation, Zephine said carefully. Before this gathering ends, the truth about Dravish is going to come out. What truth? That he murdered his way to the Alpha throne. That his claim to rule Vartek is built on lies. Marska's eyes widened slightly. You have proof? Yes. Then I'm definitely helping. When the moment comes, I'll make sure the Bloodstone delegation supports the truth. She glanced at the covered body. But first, we need to deal with this. Together, they moved the guard's body to a more concealed location. Marska proved efficient and practical, asking no unnecessary questions. When they were done, she looked at Zephine seriously. The meeting will likely continue for several more hours. Dravish is trying to convince the other alphas to sign the alliance treaty tonight, before anyone has time to think too carefully about the terms. Will they sign? Some might. The temptation of the silver mines is strong. Marska paused. But if there was a disruption, something that forced the meeting to extend into tomorrow, that would give your allies time to make their move. Zephine understood. You want me to create a disruption. I want you to survive long enough to see this through, and that means keeping Dravish off balance. What kind of disruption? Marska smiled, and it wasn't a kind expression. Leave that to me. She disappeared into the shadows, moving with the ease of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Zephine stood alone for a moment, trying to decide if trusting Marska was brilliant or suicidal. Before she could decide, a commotion erupted near the stone circle. Shouts, snarls, the sound of fighting. Zephine ran toward the sound, along with dozens of other wolves. When she reached the perimeter of the circle, she found chaos. Two of the delegations, Enraged and Stonemaw, had gotten into a fight. What started as a verbal argument had escalated to physical violence. Wolves in both human and animal form were grappling with each other while guards tried to separate them. Inside the stone circle, the alphas had risen, the meeting disrupted. Dravish looked furious, barking orders at his warriors. Aldrich was trying to calm the situation, positioning himself between the fighting groups. And there, near the edge of the circle, Zephine saw Kelver. He caught her eye and understanding passed between them. Marska had created the disruption. Now they had to use it. Kelver made his way to Aldrich, speaking urgently. The Nightfen Alpha listened, his expression growing thoughtful, then nodded. The fighting was finally brought under control, both sides separating with considerable growling and posturing. The Alphas convened in a tight group, clearly arguing about how to proceed. Finally, Dravish's voice rang out across the clearing. "We will reconvene at dawn. All parties will return to their camps and remain there. Any further violence will result in immediate expulsion from the gathering." It wasn't what he'd wanted. Zephine could see the frustration in every line of his body. He'd wanted the treaty signed tonight, had been close to achieving it. Now he'd have to wait. And waiting gave his enemies time. As the various delegations began returning to their camps, Zephine slipped away. She needed to find Kelver to coordinate their next move. She found him near the Nightfen wagons, speaking quietly with Aldrich. When he saw her approaching, he excused himself and drew her aside. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "at dawn when the meeting reconvenes. That's when we make our move. Are you certain? Aldrich has agreed to support us. He's not convinced yet, but he's willing to listen to the evidence." Kelver's eyes were bright with determination. "And Marska approached me. Bloodstone will support us too." "2 packs," Zephine murmured. "Against Dravish and whoever sides with him. It might be enough. If we present the evidence properly, if we can get the other alphas to actually look at the truth, they might turn on him. And if they don't?" Marska had created the disruption. Now they had to use it. Kelver made his way to Aldrich, speaking urgently. The Nightfen Alpha listened, his expression growing thoughtful, then nodded. The fighting was finally brought under control, both sides separating with considerable growling and posturing. The Alphas convened in a tight group, clearly arguing about how to proceed. Finally, Dravish's voice rang out across the clearing. "We will reconvene at dawn. All parties will return to their camps and remain there. Any further violence will result in immediate expulsion from the gathering." It wasn't what he'd wanted. Zephine could see the frustration in every line of his body. He'd wanted the treaty signed tonight, had been close to achieving it. Now he'd have to wait. And waiting gave his enemies time. As the various delegations began returning to their camps, Zephine slipped away. She needed to find Kelver to coordinate their next move. She found him near the Nightfen wagons, speaking quietly with Aldrich. When he saw her approaching, he excused himself and drew her aside. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "at dawn when the meeting reconvenes. That's when we make our move. Are you certain? Aldrich has agreed to support us. He's not convinced yet, but he's willing to listen to the evidence." Kelver's eyes were bright with determination. "And Marska approached me. Bloodstone will support us too." 2 packs, Zephine murmured. "Against Dravish and whoever sides with him. It might be enough. If we present the evidence properly, if we can get the other alphas to actually look at the truth, they might turn on him. And if they don't?" Kelver's expression grew grim. "Then we fight our way out and hope we're fast enough." Zephine nodded. She'd known from the beginning that this was likely to end in violence. "What do you need me to do?" "Rest. Prepare. Tomorrow is going to be the most dangerous day of both our lives." He was right, of course. but rest seemed impossible. Zephine found a quiet spot near the edge of the Nightfen camp and settled down, her back against a wagon wheel. Around her, wolves were bedding down for the night, exhausted from the day's tensions. She closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she started to drift off, she saw Dravish's face, heard his voice, felt the phantom pain of old wounds. Tomorrow she would face him, not as a victim, not as prey, as his executioner. Dawn came too quickly and not fast enough. Zephine had given up on sleep sometime before midnight and instead spent the dark hours preparing. She checked her blade, sharpening it to a razor edge. She wrapped her ribs tighter, ensuring the healing wound wouldn't hinder her if she needed to fight. She braided her shortened hair back from her face, and she thought about Dravish, not the monster who'd tormented her. She'd spent enough time dwelling on that version of him. Instead, she thought about the man who'd committed murder to seize power, who'd built his reign on the corpses of his own family, who'd convinced an entire pack that strength justified any cruelty. That was the Dravish she needed to expose today. Kelver found her as the sky began to lighten. He looked as sleepless as she felt, dark circles under his eyes, but his expression was determined. "It's time," he said simply. They made their way to the stone circle as the other delegations stirred to life. This time, the atmosphere was different, heavier. Yesterday's fight had shattered the illusion of civilized cooperation. Now everyone was wary, suspicious. Perfect conditions for what was about to happen. The Alphas and their advisors gathered once more within the stone circle. Zephine was supposed to wait outside again, but Kelver had other plans. "You're coming with me," he murmured. "When the moment comes, you need to be there. You need to face him. They'll never allow an Omega inside the circle during an Alpha meeting. They will if I insist. Aldrich has agreed to support my request." Kelver's jaw tightened. "You earned this moment, Zephine. You're not watching it from a distance." Something warm unfurled in Zephine's chest. Gratitude, maybe, or recognition. They entered the stone circle together. Immediately, protests erupted from the Vartek delegation. "An Omega?" One of Dravish's advisors snarled. "This is unprecedented. Insulting." "She is under my protection," Kelver said calmly, "and she has information relevant to these proceedings." Dravish had been silent until now, studying Zephine with those cold amber eyes. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by something darker. Rage, yes, but also a twisted satisfaction. He'd been hunting her for weeks, and now she'd walked right into his grasp. "Let her stay," Dravish said, his voice smooth as silk. "I'm curious to hear what an Omega thinks she can contribute to Alpha business." The other Alphas exchanged glances but didn't object. If Dravish wasn't protesting, they saw no reason to start a conflict over it. They all settled around the central altar. The 6 Alphas sat in positions of prominence. Dravish directly across from Aldrich. Kelver positioned himself between them, with Zephine standing slightly behind him. She could feel Dravish's eyes on her, could sense him calculating, planning. He thought he had all the power here, thought she was trapped. Let him think that. The meeting began with formalities. Discussion of territorial boundaries, trade agreements, minor disputes between packs. Zephine barely listened. She was focused on Dravish, on the moment that was coming. Finally, they reached the main topic, the proposed alliance. Dravish stood, commanding attention effortlessly. "As I outlined yesterday, I'm proposing an unprecedented alliance. 6 packs united under a common agreement. Shared resources, shared protection, shared prosperity. Shared subordination to you, you mean?" the Bloodstone Alpha said. His name was Theron, and he was even larger than Dravish, scarred and gray-haired. "You want us to acknowledge your supremacy." "I want us to acknowledge mutual strength," Dravish countered. "But yes, as the strongest pack, Vartek would lead the alliance. That's simply practical." "And the Silver Mines?" This from the Ironridge Alpha, a sharp-eyed female named Corvina. "You're offering us access, but under what terms?" "Generous terms. Each pack receives a percentage based on their contribution to the Alliance's defense and resources. They were circling the agreement, testing the edges, looking for weaknesses. But Zephine could see that some of them were tempted. The promise of wealth and security was powerful. She glanced at Kelver. He was waiting, letting Dravish commit further to his proposal. Let him think he was winning. Finally, Kelver stood. Before any agreement is signed, I believe there's something the Council should know about Alpha Dravish. The stone circle went silent. Dravish's expression remained neutral, but Zephine saw the tension in his shoulders. Oh? And what might that be? The truth about how you became Alpha of the Vartek Pack. I became Alpha through the traditional challenge. Everyone knows this. Everyone knows what you've told them, Kelver corrected. But the truth is quite different. He pulled the documents from his pack, the oilcloth carefully unwrapped. The papers inside were yellowed with age but still legible. He handed them to Aldrich first. What is this? Aldrich asked, scanning the first page. His expression shifted from curiosity to shock. Evidence, Kelver said. Testimony from witnesses. Financial records. Everything proving that Dravish didn't challenge the previous Alpha fairly. He murdered him. And his entire family. Dravish laughed. It was a cold, calculated sound. This is absurd. You bring ancient papers, documents that could have been forged by anyone, and expect us to believe them over 15 years of stable rule. They're not forged, Kelver said quietly. And I can prove it. How? Because I'm the witness. I'm the family member who survived. The silence that followed was absolute. Zephine watched as understanding dawned on the faces around the circle. She saw Aldrich's eyes widen, saw the other Alphas lean forward, suddenly intensely interested, and she saw Dravish's mask finally slip. Just for a moment, just long enough for everyone to see the monster beneath. Impossible, Dravish said. The entire bloodline was destroyed. I personally confirmed it. You confirmed what you wanted to believe, Kelver replied. You were so certain of your victory that you didn't check as carefully as you should have. He turned to address the other Alphas. 15 years ago, Dravish poisoned Alpha Mordian and his mate. When their eldest sons tried to investigate, he had them killed too. Made it look like accidents. Rogue attacks. Lies. Dravish's voice was hard now, the silk giving way to iron. He has no proof. I have testimony here from Vartek Pack members who witnessed your crimes. Wolves you thought were dead or too frightened to speak. Aldrich was still reading, passing pages to the other Alphas. By the moon, this is detailed. Names, dates, methods. All forgeries. Created by someone with a grudge against me. Are they? Kelver's eyes flashed. Then perhaps we should ask your own warriors. I'm sure some of them remember the night Alpha Mordian died. The night you moved so quickly to seize power. The convenient disappearance of anyone who might have challenged you. Dravish's control was cracking. Zephine could see it in the way his hands clenched, in the barely controlled fury in his eyes. This is a coup attempt. That's all this is. Some disgraced wolf trying to steal what I've rightfully earned. Earned? Kelver's voice rose. You murdered your way to that throne, and you've spent 15 years ruling through fear and cruelty, crushing anyone who showed weakness, tormenting those who couldn't fight back. I've made Vartek strong, powerful, respected. You've made Vartek a nightmare. Kelver gestured to Zephine. She knows. She lived it. All eyes turned to Zephine. She felt the weight of their attention, the curiosity and judgment. Dravish smiled then, cruel and confident. Her? You're using her as your witness? An Omega who attacked my warriors, murdered pack members, spread chaos and destruction? She's a criminal. She's a survivor, Kelver shot back. Someone who endured months of torture and abuse in your court. Someone you designated Omega simply because her wolf was damaged by trauma. Someone you used as an example to terrify others into submission. She's proof of nothing except my weakness in letting her live. Zephine had been silent until now, letting Kelver present the case. But at those words, something inside her snapped. She stepped forward. You didn't let me live. I survived in spite of you. Dravish's eyes locked onto hers. You survived because I allowed it. Because I found your suffering entertaining. No. Zephine's voice was steady, clear. I survived because you underestimated me. Because you were so arrogant, so certain of your power, that you never imagined an Omega could fight back. And what exactly did you fight back against? Dravish stood, towering over her. What terrible crimes did I commit? I gave you food, shelter, a place in my pack. The abuse you claim was simple discipline. You were weak, and I tried to make you stronger. You tried to break me. There's a difference. If you're broken, it's because you were already damaged. The casual cruelty in his tone, the complete dismissal of her suffering, was too familiar. Zephine had heard it before in those endless months of torment. But now she didn't flinch. You're right, she said. I was damaged. By you. By what you allowed to happen in your court. By the culture of cruelty you created where the strong can torture the weak without consequence. She turned to address the other alphas. Ask yourselves why an Omega would risk everything, would attack one of the most powerful alphas in the region. What could drive someone that desperate? Madness, Dravish suggested. Or malice. Justice, Zephine corrected. And revenge. Which, if he's telling the truth about only disciplining me, should seem disproportionate. Insane even. She looked back at Dravish. Unless there's more to the story. Unless what happened to me was so horrific that this level of response makes perfect sense. The Bloodstone Alpha, Theron, shifted in his seat. What exactly are you claiming happened? Zephine didn't want to answer. Didn't want to speak those memories aloud. But she forced herself to continue. 6 months. I spent 6 months in his court after I was designated Omega. He had me beaten daily. Starved when I showed any defiance. He allowed his warriors to... She stopped, swallowed hard. To use me however they wanted. As entertainment. As a lesson to others about what happens when you're weak. She could see some of the alphas looking uncomfortable now. Corvina, the Iron Ridge Alpha, looked particularly disturbed. And through it all, Zephine continued. He watched. Sometimes he participated. Always he justified it as necessary discipline. As what Omegas deserved. Omegas need firm guidance, Dravish said. Everyone knows this. There's a difference between guidance and torture. This from Aldrich, his voice hard. Even Omegas have basic rights under pack law. Pack law is what each alpha decides it is. No, Theron rumbled. Pack law is bound by tradition, by common decency. What you're describing goes well beyond discipline. Dravish's expression turned contemptuous. Soft. You've all grown soft. This is why Vartek is stronger than your packs. We understand that true strength requires sacrifice. Requires that the weak serve the strong without question. That's not strength. Marska spoke up from where she stood with the Bloodstone delegation. That's tyranny. Call it what you will, Dravish snapped. The results speak for themselves. Vartek is prosperous, powerful, feared and respected. Feared, yes, Kelver said. But respected? No. You're about to offer an alliance to these alphas built on access to silver mines. But why do they need you for that? Why can't they simply take the mines by force? Because they know they'd lose, Dravish said with absolute confidence. Exactly. They fear your military strength. But that fear is built on the labor of Omegas you've worked to death in those mines. On the warriors you've brutalized into perfect obedience. On the wolves you've executed for the smallest infractions. Kelver turned to the other alphas. Is that the alliance you want? One built on fear and cruelty? One where your own packs will be measured against Vartek standards of strength? Where your Omegas will be treated as disposable? Where any weakness will be punished without mercy? He could see them considering it now. Could see doubt creeping into their expressions. Those documents are forgeries, Dravish insisted, but his voice had lost some of its power. Created by a traitor who wants to steal my throne. Then let's verify them, Theron suggested. Let's send for some of the wolves named in the testimony. Hear what they have to say. That could take days. Then we have days. Aldrich's voice was firm. No alliance will be signed until we've investigated these claims thoroughly. Dravish's face darkened. You would take the word of an Omega and a traitor over mine? After everything I've offered you? We're taking evidence seriously, Corvina said. As we should. If you're innocent, the investigation will prove it. But Dravish's reaction was telling. Instead of welcoming the chance to prove his innocence, he looked cornered. Dangerous. No, he said flatly. I will not subject myself to this farce. The alliance offer is withdrawn. And as for you, he pointed at Zephyne. You're coming back to Vartek, where you'll face justice for your crimes. She's under my protection, Kelver said immediately. Your protection means nothing. She's Vartek Pack. She answers to Vartek law. She's a refugee seeking asylum, Aldrich interjected, which the Nightfen Pack grants. Dravish laughed bitterly. So that's how it is. You're choosing sides against me based on the lies of traitors. We're choosing to investigate serious allegations, Theron corrected. If you're innocent, you have nothing to fear. I fear nothing. But Dravish's eyes betrayed him. They flicked to his warriors positioned outside the circle, calculating odds. But I will not stay here to be insulted and accused. He turned to leave the stone circle. If you leave now, Kelver called after him, you're confirming everything. You're admitting guilt. Dravish paused at the edge of the circle. When he turned back, his expression was cold and hard. I'm admitting nothing. But I will not play these political games. His eyes found Zephyne. As for you, Omega, enjoy your temporary freedom. It won't last. I'll find you again. And when I do, what I did before will seem merciful compared to what's coming. He strode out of the circle, his warriors falling in around him. Within minutes, the Vartek delegation was packing up, preparing to leave. Zephyne stood frozen, watching him go. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. He was supposed to be brought down here, publicly humiliated and stripped of power. Instead, he was leaving. Still free. Still alpha. Still a threat. We didn't lose, Kelver said quietly beside her. We planted doubt. Made the other alphas question him. That's more than we had before. He's still out there. Still in power. For now. But his reign is weakened. The other packs won't ally with him. And wolves in his own pack will have heard about these accusations. Seeds of rebellion have been sown. Zephyne knew he was right. But it didn't feel like victory. Felt like unfinished business. Aldrich approached them. The investigation will continue. I'm sending runners to Vartek territory to find the wolves named in those documents. If they confirm the testimony, we'll call for a regional council. Force Dravish to answer for his crimes. And if he refuses, then the other packs will know exactly what he is. And they'll act accordingly. Aldrich's expression was grim. What you both did today took courage. You've given us the truth. Now we have to decide what to do with it. As the gathering began to disperse, Zephyne found herself standing at the edge of the stone circle, staring across the clearing toward where the Vartek camp had been. Dravish was gone, but his parting words echoed in her mind. He would come for her. He wouldn't stop until she was dead or back under his control. She'd bloodied his reign, yes, but she hadn't ended it. The war was far from over. What price would she have to pay to finally be free of him? 3 weeks after the Moonstone gathering, Zephyne stood on a ridge overlooking Vartek territory and wondered if she'd made the right choice. Kelver had offered her safety, a place in his network of rebels and sympathizers. Aldrich had offered her sanctuary in Nightfen lands, where Dravish's reach was limited. She'd refused both, because Dravish had been right about one thing. This wasn't over. And running, hiding, waiting for others to bring him down. That wasn't justice. That wasn't revenge. That was just prolonging the inevitable. So she'd returned to Vartek. Alone. Against every piece of advice and common sense. She'd returned to finish what she'd started. The landscape below her was familiar in the worst way. The iron summit rose in the distance, Dravish's fortress carved into the mountainside. She could see the mining operations, the military training grounds, the sprawl of the pack settlement. It looked peaceful from here, orderly. You couldn't see the cruelty from this distance. Zephine pulled her cloak tighter against the wind. She'd spent the past 3 weeks preparing, learning everything she could about Dravish's movements, his schedule, his habits. Kelver had helped despite his objections, providing intelligence from his network of contacts within Vartek. She knew that Dravish had become paranoid since the gathering, had doubled his personal guard, was sleeping in different locations each night, never establishing a pattern. He knew she would come for him, was waiting for it. Good. Let him wait. Let him fear. She'd become very good at fear herself. Zephine made her way down from the ridge, moving through terrain she knew intimately. She'd grown up in these mountains before everything fell apart. Knew every trail, every hiding spot, every cave and crevice. Her destination was a small settlement on the outskirts of Vartek territory, a place where miners and their families lived, far enough from the Iron Summit to have some independence but close enough to be under Dravish's control. According to Kelver's intelligence, this settlement housed some of the wolves mentioned in the documents. Witnesses who'd seen Dravish's crimes but had been too frightened to speak out. Until now, Aldrich's runners had reached some of them, had recorded their testimony. The evidence against Dravish was growing, becoming undeniable. But Zephine needed more. She needed something that would force the pack to turn on him completely. Something that would make his fall absolute and irreversible. She reached the settlement as night fell. It was small, maybe 30 buildings clustered around a central commons area. She could smell cook fires and hear the murmur of conversation. Careful to stay hidden, she circled the settlement until she found what she was looking for. A modest house on the edge, a single candle burning in the window. This was the home of Ravenna, a former pack healer who'd treated Alpha Mordian the night he died, who'd witnessed Dravish's poisoning firsthand but had been too frightened to speak. Until Aldrich's runners had come. Until she'd learned that others were finally standing against Dravish. Zephine approached the house carefully, alert for guards or watchers. But the settlement seemed quiet, unaware of her presence. She knocked softly on the door. 3 quick taps, then 2 slower ones. The pattern Kelver had told her would identify her as friendly. The door opened a crack. An eye peered out, old and wary. "Who are you?" a voice asked. "A friend. Kelver sent me." The door opened wider, revealing an elderly female wolf with gray hair and deep lines etched into her face. Ravenna studied Zephine for a long moment, then nodded. "Come in, quickly." Zephine stepped inside, and Ravenna shut the door behind her, throwing a heavy bolt. The interior was simple but comfortable. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, and shelves lined the walls filled with jars and bottles. A healer's home. "You're the Omega," Ravenna said. It wasn't a question. "I am. You're either very brave or very foolish to return here. Dravish has hunters searching for you constantly." "I know, but I need your help." Ravenna moved to a small table and gestured for Zephine to sit. "I already gave my testimony to the Nightfen runners. What more can I offer? I need to know everything about that night. Everything you saw when Alpha Mordian died." The old healer's expression grew pained. "I've carried that guilt for 15 years. Knowing I could have spoken out, could have saved others from Dravish's reign. You were frightened. Everyone was. Fear is not an excuse for cowardice." Ravenna poured tea from a pot by the fire, her hands shaking slightly. "But I'll tell you what I know. Not just what I told the runners. Everything." She settled into her chair, and her voice took on the cadence of memory. Alpha Mordian was strong, healthy. There was no reason for him to suddenly fall ill. But that night, he collapsed during dinner. His mate called for me immediately. What were his symptoms? Fever? Convulsions? Difficulty breathing? At first, I thought it was some kind of infection. But the progression was too fast, too severe. Ravenna's eyes grew distant. I prepared medicines, tried everything I knew, but nothing worked. He deteriorated rapidly. And Dravish. He arrived within an hour. said he'd heard the Alpha was ill and wanted to help. But I remember. She stopped, her brow furrowing. I remember thinking his concern seemed false. Performed. Did you see him do anything? Give Mordian anything? No. But he insisted on staying in the room. Wouldn't leave. And at one point, when I was preparing a new medicine, I saw him standing over Mordian's bed. Just watching. With this expression I couldn't read. What happened next? Mordian died just before dawn. His mate was devastated. Screaming, cursing the illness that had taken him so suddenly. Ravenna's voice dropped to a whisper. But I knew. Something in my gut told me this wasn't natural. Did you investigate? I tried. Quietly. I examined Mordian's body, looking for signs. And I found them. Discoloration around his lips. A particular smell to his breath. Signs consistent with wolfsbane poisoning. Zephine's breath caught. Wolfsbane was rare and deadly to wolves. Even small amounts could be fatal. You're certain? As certain as I could be without a formal examination. But I had no proof. No one had seen Dravish administer poison. And by the time I'd identified the signs, Mordian's body had already been prepared for burial. Why didn't you speak up? Ravenna's expression filled with shame. Because the next morning, Dravish's warriors came to my home. They told me that spreading rumors about the Alpha's death would be considered treason. That my family would pay the price if I spoke out of turn. He threatened you. Yes, and I believed him. I'd seen what he was capable of, how quickly he consolidated power. Within a week, anyone who might have challenged him was dead or disappeared. She looked at Zephine with haunted eyes. I chose my family's safety over the truth. And I've regretted it every day since. Zephine reached across the table and took the old healer's hand. You're speaking now. That's what matters. Is it? Will my testimony be enough to bring him down? I don't know. But it's part of a larger picture. A pattern of murder and intimidation that can't be ignored. Ravenna nodded slowly. There's more. Something I didn't tell the runners because I wasn't sure it mattered. Tell me. The wolfsbane that killed Mordian, it's not native to this region. It has to be imported, carefully cultivated. There are only a few sources. And one of those sources is a merchant who travels between packs. I know him. He came through the settlement a few weeks before Mordian died. I remember because he tried to sell me some rare herbs for my healing work. Zephine leaned forward. Do you think Dravish bought the wolfsbane from him? I think it's possible. And if the merchant kept records, if he can be convinced to testify, we'd have a direct link between Dravish and the poison. Exactly. Zephine felt excitement stirring. This was it. The final piece of evidence they needed. Where is this merchant now? He travels a circuit. Should be passing through the Shadowfen territory within the next few days. I need his name. A description. Anything that can help me find him. Ravenna stood and moved to a shelf, pulling down a worn journal. She flipped through pages until she found what she was looking for. His name is Torvik. He's distinctive, missing his left ear from an old fight, and he has a scar running down his jaw. She tore the page from the journal and handed it to Zephine. Contained more details. The merchant's usual route, the places he stopped, the goods he traded. Thank you, Zephine said. This could change everything. I hope so. For all of us. Ravenna's expression grew serious. But be careful. Dravish isn't just hunting you anymore. He's hunting anyone connected to you. Anyone who might help you. I know. That's why I won't stay long. She stood to leave, but Ravenna stopped her. Wait, there's something else you should know. What? Dravish has been meeting with someone. A stranger who arrived at the Iron Summit a week ago. No one knows who he is or where he came from, but the rumors say he's powerful. Dangerous. That Dravish hired him for something. Zephine felt a chill run down her spine. Hired him for what? To find you. And kill you. Ravenna's voice was grim. They're calling him the Hunter. And they say he's never failed to catch his prey. Perfect. As if Dravish's own warriors weren't enough, now there was a specialist tracking her. But Zephine refused to let fear take hold. She'd faced worse, survived worse. "Thank you for the warning," she said. She left Ravenna's house and disappeared into the darkness, her mind already working through the new information. She needed to find Torvik, the merchant, before Dravish realized his significance. And she needed to stay ahead of this hunter, whoever he was. The next few days were a blur of movement. Zephine traveled fast and light, pushing herself to reach Shadowfen territory. She slept in snatches, always alert, always watching for pursuit. And pursuit came. She first noticed it on the third day. A presence behind her, never quite visible but always there. Someone tracking her with skill and patience. The hunter. Zephine changed tactics. Instead of trying to outrun him, she led him on a winding path through difficult terrain. Through marshes and thick forest, across rivers and over rocky ground that would hide her trail. But he stayed with her, never closing the distance, but never falling behind either. It was unnerving. She was used to being the hunter, not the hunted. Used to being in control. Now she was prey again and she hated it. On the fourth night, she finally reached Shadowfen territory and the town where Torvik was supposed to be. It was larger than Ravenna's settlement. A proper trading post where wolves from multiple packs came to buy and sell goods. Zephine entered the town carefully, keeping her hood up and her manner inconspicuous. She wandered the market area, searching for any sign of the merchant. She found him at a stall near the center of the market. He was exactly as Ravenna had described, the missing ear and scar making him unmistakable. He was haggling with a customer over the price of some exotic spice. Zephine waited until the customer left, then approached. "Torvik?" she asked quietly. He looked up, his one eye assessing her. "Who's asking?" "Someone interested in your records. Specifically, sales you made in Vartek territory 15 years ago." His expression closed off immediately. "I don't know what you're talking about. Wolfsbane, you sold it to someone shortly before Alpha Mordian died. I need you to confirm who bought it." Torvik's face paled. "You're insane. I'm not getting involved in this." "You're already involved. You sold the poison that killed an alpha." "I sell all kinds of things. What people do with them isn't my responsibility. Maybe not legally, but morally." Zephine leaned closer. "You helped a murderer seize power. How many deaths are you partially responsible for?" "I'm a merchant. I stay neutral." "There's no neutral when it comes to murder." Torvik glanced around nervously. "Even if I wanted to help you, which I don't, I destroyed those records years ago. Too dangerous to keep." "You're lying." "I'm not. And even if I wasn't, why would I risk Dravish's wrath to help some random wolf?" Zephine pulled back her hood slightly, just enough for him to see her face clearly. "Because I'm not random. I'm the Omega who's been tearing his reign apart. And if you help me finish the job, you'll be on the winning side." Torvik stared at her, recognition dawning. Then fear. "You need to leave. Right now. Before someone recognizes you. Not until you agree to testify." "I can't. I won't. It's suicide." Zephine felt frustration boiling up. She didn't have time for this. The hunter was still out there, getting closer. She needed Torvik's cooperation, and she needed it now. But before she could press further, she felt it. That presence she'd been sensing for days. Closer now. Much closer. She spun, her hand going to her blade. He was standing at the edge of the market. Tall, lean, dressed in dark leather that seemed to absorb light. His face was partially hidden by a hood, but she could see enough. Sharp features, cold eyes, the bearing of a predator. The hunter. Their eyes met across the crowded market. He tilted his head slightly, acknowledging her awareness of him. Then he smiled, and Zephine knew with absolute certainty that she was in serious trouble. How did you outrun someone who'd never lost a prey in his life? Zephine didn't wait to find out. She ran. The market exploded into chaos as she vaulted over Torvik's stall and sprinted toward the nearest alley. Behind her, she heard the hunter moving, his footsteps eerily silent despite his speed. She shifted mid-stride, her wolf form completing in a heartbeat. On 4 legs, she was faster, more agile. She wove through narrow passages, leaped over obstacles, her claws scrabbling for purchase on the cobblestones. The hunter stayed with her. She could hear him now, his own wolf form pursuing her with relentless efficiency. Zephine burst out of the alley into an open square. Bad move. Too exposed. But she had no choice. She ran across it, heading for the tree line beyond the town. If she could reach the forest, she'd have advantages. Places to hide. Terrain she knew better than him. She was almost there when he tackled her. They went down in a tangle of fur and fangs. Zephine twisted, trying to get free, but the hunter was strong, skilled. He had her pinned before she could fully react. She shifted back to human, hoping the sudden change would throw him off. It worked, but only for a second. Long enough for her to slip free and draw her blade. The hunter shifted too, rising to face her. His hood had fallen back, revealing his face fully. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30 summers. Handsome in a harsh way, with scars marking his throat and jaw. "You're fast," he said. His voice was surprisingly calm. "But not fast enough." "Who are you?" Zephine demanded, her blade steady despite her hammering heart. "Does it matter?" "It does to me." He considered this. "My name is Tavrin, and I've been paid very well to bring you back to Dravish. Alive preferably, but dead works too. Then you'll have to settle for dead, because I'm not going back." Tavrin's smile was cold. "We'll see." He moved. Fast. Impossibly fast. His blade appeared from nowhere, clashing against hers with a shower of sparks. They fought in the open square, a deadly dance of steel and fury. Zephine had learned to fight in the worst way possible, through pain and desperation and survival. Her technique was raw, brutal, effective. But Tavrin was trained, professional. Every move calculated for maximum efficiency. She was losing. She knew it within the first exchange. He was better than her, stronger, faster. It was only a matter of time before he found an opening. But then Tavrin made a mistake. He underestimated her willingness to get hurt to land a strike. Zephine let his blade slash across her shoulder, accepting the pain, using the opening to drive her own blade toward his throat. He dodged, but not fast enough. Her blade scored a line across his jaw, drawing blood. Tavrin stepped back, reassessing. "You're willing to die to win. That's rare." "I've already died," Zephine said. "Everything since has been borrowed time." Before Tavrin could respond, voices erupted from the edge of the square. Guards. The town watch responding to the fight. Tavrin cursed under his breath. "This isn't over." "I know." He shifted back to wolf form and disappeared into the shadows. Zephine didn't wait around to explain herself to the guards. She shifted and ran in the opposite direction, ignoring the blood streaming from her shoulder. She made it back to the forest, finding a small cave where she could tend to her wound. The slash was deep but not fatal. She cleaned it as best she could and bound it with strips torn from her cloak. Then she sat back against the stone wall and tried to think. Tavrin was a problem. A serious one. She couldn't beat him in a straight fight, and he would keep coming until one of them was dead. But maybe there was another way. Maybe she could use him. An idea began to form. Dangerous, possibly suicidal, but potentially brilliant. If Tavrin wanted her, let him chase her. Let him follow her right to where she wanted to go anyway. Back to the Iron Summit. Back to Dravish. She'd been planning to infiltrate the fortress alone, to find a way to kill Dravish before his security killed her. But with Tavrin on her trail, she had a built-in distraction. The hunter would become the hunted. Zephine spent the rest of the night preparing. She treated her wound more thoroughly, ate what little food she had left, and rested as much as she could. At dawn, she set out, not trying to hide her trail this time, making it easy for Tavrin to follow, leading him home. The journey took 3 days. 3 days of steady travel, with Tavrin always a few hours behind her. She could feel his presence, constant and patient. Good. Let him think he had her cornered. Let him believe he was in control. The Iron Summit came into view on the 4th morning. Zephine stood on the same ridge where she'd stood weeks ago, looking down at the fortress. Coming home had a bitter taste. She waited there until she felt Tavern's approach. Didn't turn around when she heard his footsteps. "You led me here on purpose," he said. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I'm done running. Done hiding." She finally turned to face him. "You want to bring me to Dravish? Fine. Let's go see him together." Tavern's expression was skeptical. "What's the trap?" "No trap. Just a proposal." Zephine met his eyes. "You've been hunting me for weeks. You've seen what I can do. How I fight. How I survive." "I have." "Then you know I'm not just some random Omega. You know there's more to this story. I know Dravish wants you badly enough to pay a fortune for your capture. Do you know why?" Tavern was quiet for a moment. "I've heard rumors. About the Moonstone Gathering. About accusations of murder." "Not accusations. Truth. Dravish killed his way to power. And I'm the one who's been making him pay for it." Zephine stepped closer. "You're a hunter. Professional. Do you care about the morality of your contracts?" "Not usually. But I've never taken a contract from someone who might be a murderous tyrant before. Does that matter to you?" Tavern looked away, toward the Iron Summit. "I don't know. I spent my life being neutral. Doing jobs, getting paid, moving on. This isn't a normal job. And Dravish isn't a normal client." Zephine took a breath. "I'm going down there. I'm going to walk into that fortress and finish what I started. You can bring me in as your prisoner, collect your payment, and watch while he tortures me to death. Or you can help me bring him down, and be on the right side of history for once." Tavern laughed, but it sounded strained. "You're asking a hired hunter to betray his client, to give up a fortune. For what? Principle. For justice. And yes, for principle." Zephine held his gaze. "I know what it's like to be used, to be treated as nothing more than a tool. If you turn me over to Dravish, that's all you'll ever be to him. A useful weapon, nothing more. And if I help you, then you're a person making a choice, deciding what kind of wolf you want to be." Tavern was silent for a long time. Zephine waited, her heart pounding. This whole plan depended on him, on whether there was anything beneath his professional exterior, any shred of conscience or honor. Finally, he spoke. "What's your plan?" Relief flooded through her. "You bring me in. Tell Dravish you captured me. He'll want to see me immediately, will want to gloat. That's when we strike. I'm not asking you to fight with me, just to get me close. Once I'm in the same room with him, I'll handle the rest." "That's suicide." "Probably, but I'm doing it anyway." Zephine's voice was steady. "The question is whether you're helping or hindering." Tavern studied her for another long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "I must be insane, but all right. I'll get you inside." They approached the Iron Summit together, with Zephine's hands bound in front of her and Tavern's blade pressed against her back. To any observer, it looked exactly like what it was supposed to be. A hunter bringing in captured prey. The gates opened for them. Tavern's reputation preceded him. The guards waved them through without question. Inside the fortress, Zephine tried not to show any recognition. But every hallway, every chamber, was burned into her memory. She'd suffered here, bled here, nearly died here. Now she was back to finish it. They were brought to the throne room, the same chamber where Dravish held court, where he'd tormented her in front of everyone. He was there, sitting on his throne of carved stone, flanked by his most trusted warriors. When he saw Zephine, his face split into a triumphant smile. "At last," he said, standing. "The wayward Omega returns." Tavern shoved Zephine forward. She fell to her knees in front of the throne, playing her part. "Excellent work, Hunter," Dravish said. "Your payment will be delivered shortly. But first, I want to enjoy this moment." He descended from the throne and circled Zephine slowly. "Did you really think you could win? That you, a broken Omega, could bring down an Alpha King?" Zephine kept her head down, her bound hands trembling. not from fear, from rage barely contained. "You bloodied my reign," Dravish continued. "I'll give you that. You caused me considerable trouble. But it ends now, today. In front of my entire court, I'm going to make an example of you that will be remembered for generations." He grabbed her hair, yanking her head back to force her to look at him. "Any last words?" Zéphine smiled. "Yes, your exile is over." Dravish frowned, confused by the strange statement. "What are you?" She moved. Her bound hands came up, the rope already cut through with the small blade she'd hidden in her palm. She drove the blade up into Dravish's throat, feeling it punch through flesh and windpipe. His eyes went wide with shock. He staggered backward, blood pouring from the wound. The throne room exploded into chaos. Warriors rushed forward. But Tavrin was already moving, his blade flashing as he engaged the closest guards. Zéphine shifted, her wolf form tearing free. She didn't go after the warriors. She went after Dravish. He was trying to shift, trying to heal the wound through transformation. But Zéphine didn't give him the chance. She was on him in a heartbeat, her jaws closing around his throat. They went down together, crashing to the floor. Dravish fought desperately, his human form struggling against her wolf strength. But he was weakening. The blood loss was too severe. Zéphine shifted back to human, pinning him with her weight. She looked into his eyes as the life faded from them. "This is for every Omega you broke," she whispered. "Every wolf you tortured. Every life you destroyed." Dravish's lips moved, trying to form words. But all that came out was blood. Then he was gone. The Alpha King was dead. Zéphine stood, covered in blood, surrounded by chaos. Tavrin had disabled or killed several of the guards, but more were coming. This was it, her moment of triumph, and probably her death. But then Kelver burst into the throne room, accompanied by a dozen wolves wearing Nightfen colors. Behind them came more wolves, representatives from all the packs that had been at the Moonstone gathering. "Stand down!" Kelver's voice boomed through the chamber. "By order of the Regional Council, Dravish has been convicted of murder and treason. His death is sanctioned." The Vartek warriors hesitated, looking between the body of their alpha and the coalition of packs arrayed against them. Slowly, they lowered their weapons. Aldrich stepped forward. The evidence against Dravish was overwhelming. Multiple witnesses confirmed his crimes. He has been judged and executed. Any who wish to dispute this can take it up with the full council. No one spoke. Kelver approached Zéphine. "It's over. You did it." Zéphine looked down at Dravish's corpse, the monster who'd ruled her nightmares for so long, dead by her hand. It should have felt like victory, like closure. Instead, she just felt empty. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild," Kelver said. "Vartek needs a new alpha. The pack needs to heal from 15 years of tyranny. And me." Kelver's expression was gentle. "You're free, truly free. You can go wherever you want. Be whoever you want. Free." The word felt foreign. Zéphine looked around the throne room, at the wolves watching her, at Tavrin, who'd chosen to help her in the end, at Kelver, who'd given her the tools for revenge. She'd spent so long focused on destroying Dravish that she'd never thought about what came after. "I don't know who I am without the anger," she admitted quietly. "Then you'll have to figure that out," Kelver said. "Take your time. The world isn't going anywhere." In the days that followed, Zéphine watched as Kelver was formally recognized as the rightful alpha of Vartek. The pack celebrated, relieved to be free of Dravish's cruel reign. Reforms were implemented. Omega rights were established and protected. The culture of cruelty began to change slowly but surely. Tavrin found her on the same ridge where this had all begun, looking down at the Iron Summit one last time. "Leaving?" he asked. "Yes." "Where will you go?" "I don't know. Somewhere new. Somewhere I can figure out who I am when I'm not defined by what was done to me." Tavrin was quiet for a moment. "I'm heading east. New territories. New contracts." He paused. "You could come with me, if you wanted." Zéphine looked at him, surprised. Why would you want that? Because you're the most interesting person I've ever hunted. And because, he shrugged, I think we'd make a good team. It was tempting to have a companion, someone who understood what it was like to live on the edge. But Zephine shook her head. I need to do this alone. Need to learn to stand on my own. Not because I have to survive, but because I choose to. Tavrin nodded, understanding. If you change your mind, I'll be around. He shifted to wolf form and disappeared into the forest. Zephine stood alone on the ridge, the wind pulling at her cloak. Below her, the iron summit gleamed in the afternoon sun, a place of pain and triumph, of ending and beginning. She'd bloodied Dravish's reign and destroyed him completely, had freed herself and countless others from his cruelty. Now she had to figure out what came next. For the first time in her life, the future was hers to choose. And that was the most terrifying and exhilarating thing she'd ever faced. What would she become now that she was finally truly free? The end.